He's gonna be so excited. Hey buddy, come here, check this out.
What?
It works.
Does it?
Yeah, come check it out. What is it?
Pennsylvania.
Yeah, but more than that. I mean, this guy's Pennsylvania too, but what's this one?
It does whistle smoke.
It's the Pennsylvania T-1 Duplex.
Yeah.
And I have them in reverse for some reason. But yeah, it works. It chuffs, it smokes, it does the whistle steam. This is gonna be so awesome.
Yes, it is.
How long have I been working on this thing?
Yes, it.
Longer than you've had that bump on your head, that's for sure. Let's check it out.
Yep.
I have had terrible luck with my favorite steam engine design of all time. This is the Pennsylvania Railroad T-1 Duplex, and Lionel's made two LionMaster versions, meaning that they're semi-scale, but they're still pretty big, and I love these versions. So when I found out that they made a fully featured version of my favorite steam engine, I had to find one. Even though I already had the older TMCC version, this Legacy version, as you'll find, is incredibly desirable. But it needed some help, so let's see if I managed to cure the curse. As a bit of a recap, when I first got this thing 3 months ago, it wasn't exactly in the greatest shape. I already knew what to expect aesthetically because the seller had told me that a piece was broken off from the plow, but thankfully he still had that piece available. So I figured I could just glue it on, repaint it, and call it a day. But once I put it on my rails at home, I knew something wasn't quite right and that it was going to be a little bit more of a troubleshooting nightmare than I was expecting.
When you put a tender on the track without anything hooked up to it, it should be playing Railsounds like it is now. I've got the original board that came with it out. In it is one out of another Legacy LionMaster engine. The lights are on, and if I turn off the power, because I've got the backup power battery on there, it'll probably do its shutdown sequence.
Go to the register room to sign out. Pending 5511, out.
Yep. No problems there.
Thankfully, it was just the Railsounds board. I was able to source one of these. I'll leave the part number for this down below, but I was really worried because finding boards for Legacy stuff has typically been really difficult, but thankfully these are pretty much universal between a lot of their engines. The next problem to address was why it wasn't responding to command controls, because it seemed like there was a problem with the antenna. I would give it a command, I'd have to hover my hand over the engine to try and get it to pick things up, essentially use myself as a big old antenna to try and communicate with it. And that was showing some promise, but it wasn't exactly promising because now it meant I had to open up the engine and figure out why it didn't know it was moving, why it wasn't responding to commands, why it was just being so darn finicky. So begrudgingly, I opened up the locomotive to see what I was in for. And I was a little bit surprised at what I found. It was wet. This is smoke fluid that has been sitting in the wires inside this thing for a while. And turns out when you have a locomotive with two separate smoke units that take their own fill, then you double your chances of having smoke fluid leaking inside the locomotive. So I cleaned that out and got it as good as I could on the inside and started looking for issues potentially with the antenna. Thankfully, I got that sorted out, just was a loose and a bit of a broken connection with the actual tether itself. But now that I had sound and smoke and control going, I noticed another problem.
So this Legacy LionMaster T1 I finally have running, responding to commands. The lights work. The whistle works, but you'll notice it doesn't know that it's moving. There's no chuff. And I thought that there was something wrong with the wheels until it started doing this. It only does it on 048 turns. So I wonder if it has something to do with the bent... I had to realign the wireless tether here. And it seems to like 048 left-hand turns.
5511 here, we're moving. Over. Roger that, 5511. Out.
but then it stops again. It's so weird. I can't seem to figure it out. I've tried all sorts of different alignments, holding the wireless tether at different angles. I don't know what's going on still.
So upon further inspection, I saw this wire just kind of hanging out underneath the second set of wheels and figured that probably goes someplace important. Turns out it's part of the switch that tells the engine when to chuff, and just out of dumb luck, it was managing to come back into contact with where it was supposed to go underneath the wheels when it was at that certain kind of turn. Pretty wild, but I managed to open things up and resolder that to the connection, and it works. The last piece to fix then is actually the first thing that I knew that I had to fix. And that's the one that was actually disclosed when I bought this. So I realized how hard of a hit this thing had to take from the front in order not only to break this off, but it also even bent the part itself. It took a bit of trial and error to try and rebend things back to where they were and get things lined up. A little bit more work than I was anticipating, but I've got it closer. I haven't fully repainted it yet because I still think there's a little more work I can do to get that just right. Plus, I can't really find the right shade of dark green to use for this. So until I do, there's not a huge rush to get that part fixed, especially since it doesn't affect its performance. It doesn't stop it from working.
Acknowledged. Cleared outbound. 5511 out.
Now that it's all fixed up and running right on my rails, why did I go through the trouble of getting one if I already had the TMCC version? The shells are identical, and aside from the paint being slightly different, there's not a whole lot else different visually from these two. The details on both of them are fantastic, don't get me wrong, but there are a few things that I still like better about the newer Legacy version. For starters, there's real coal in the tender, as opposed to the die cast that's in the rear of the older TMCC release from 2003. You'll also notice there's a bit more of a gap between the tender and the locomotive, and that's because of the slightly smaller wireless tether that's being used on the newer Legacy version. You can see it here, it just takes up less space. At first, I thought it was just wider on the older version because they didn't have them lined up right, but turns out that they just need that space because the older tether takes up more space. Literally, I'm going to use this Legacy controller, this Cab 1, to show you how different these two are. It's actually quite the noticeable gap on the older TMCC version, and it's just much easier on the eyes with the Legacy version. Even though the older version on the left doesn't have whistle steam, they both have pretty good smoke output. However, it just kind of flows out of the older TMCC one, whereas it chuffs, which is another reason I wanted to fix that chuffing feature in the newer one. It just looks a little bit nicer running around the layout, especially when it's going at low speeds. But these aren't trains meant to go slow, so I find myself running them fast all the time anyways, and it's just been fantastic seeing the two of these running around, trading passenger trains and mail trains between the two. Been a lot of fun, especially getting the whole layout, if you haven't noticed, is all done up with Penzi engines. I don't have any Union Pacific in any of these shots. It's been kind of surprising to see just how much Pennsylvania Railroad and just East Coast stuff I have, especially for a collector like me that focuses mostly on Midwest stuff, especially, obviously, Union Pacific.
Oh, and it makes little rings when it moves.
Tower, this is Penzi 5511. Air is me. Brake test complete. Are we clear to pull? Over. Stand by 5511. Over. Waiting on a clear signal. 5511 out.
So going through the trouble to save this one was definitely worth it. The curse has been cured, and I am so glad that this guy's up and running here on our home rails. Now, why go through the trouble for something like this? First of all, these are tricky to find because they were only made in 2010, and pretty much everything LionMaster before this didn't have all of these features, and everything LionMaster after this kind of lost some of these features as well. They went to a generic crew talk, even though they still had whistle steam on some of the newer LionMaster engines that were legacy equipped. But this thing's got everything. It is the most fully featured example of the Pennsylvania T-1 Duplex. And Lionel made a scale version, and so did NTH. But those guys had some legal trouble and copying, tooling, and all that fun stuff. That's probably preventing them from making a new scale T1 Duplex. But they better get their act together because the T1 Trust is coming hopefully soon, where they're actually creating one of these from the ground up. Pennsylvania 5550. If you haven't heard of the T1 Trust, you better check that out because it's not a pipe dream. It's a real thing, and they've got parts of this thing already built and ready. They're doing the framework as we speak. So that's pretty exciting, and Lionel tends to like to make engines of things that are out there running. They kind of try and, when the big boy got restored, they had all the restoration versions. So better get your legal stuff together, guys, because one of these guys is coming. And I know all the scale collectors would love to have one, but for me, I'm good. This thing's set. It's got whistle steam. It's got fantastic lighting, buttery smooth operation, road-specific crew dialogue that you just don't get this combination of stuff in this engine. And I am super stoked to have it here on the secondhand Overland. Thank everyone for all their help with this thing. I know my friend Jason has his custom-built MTH T1 Duplex that even has whistle steam, but it's technically not the first T1 with that feature, just maybe the first scale one. This is the first one they made, and it's from 2010. This thing's awesome. I hope they make one again soon, but at least for now, I'm set. This thing's amazing, and made reviews on the older one that I've got. Gonna be making a review on this one probably soon, so stay tuned for those. As always, please subscribe, like, leave us a comment. Let me know what you think of this, if you'd like to see a fully featured scale version of one of these beauties. So thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you guys on the next one.
Tower, this is Pansy 5511. Air is me. Brake test complete. Are we clear to pull? Over. Pansy 5511. You're clear outbound. Over.